G'day science students, and welcome to the first video for Criterion 4 in Physical Sciences. So in this video we're going to discuss the properties of matter and phase changes. There's some notes here that you might want to pause the video and take down. I'll just discuss these briefly. So matter has both physical and chemical properties. Physical properties are things that usually that we can observe or measure, like melting and boiling points. You could put a thermometer into a substance and boil it and take a reading of the thermometer, and that will tell you the boiling point of that substance. Other things like density, electrical conductivity, and even just the physical state. Is it a solid, liquid, or a gas? Okay. Now the chemical properties are usually microscopic or happen on an atomic level. So we usually can't see these occurring at that atomic level, although we can observe chemical reactions occurring. We'll talk more about that in Criterion 8. Really, we're concerning ourselves with the physical properties in this unit. What this comes down to is the kinetic theory of matter. That states that matter is composed of very small particles, and a lot of them. Atoms or molecules usually, and they're in constant motion, even when they're solid. If we have a look at this animation here, we have neon in a solid state, and this is showing that even when neon's solid, it still has some vibration or some movement in the particles. If we look at water, for instance, these are molecules rather than atoms, and you see that this is solid water. This is meant to represent ice, basically, and you can see that even though it's very cold, it is still some movement in the particles. Okay. Now the kinetic theory of matter says that these particles have energy, and if we add energy to this, they'll move further apart and vibrate more rapidly. So let's try that with the water. So we've added some heat, and we can see those particles moving more rapidly and starting to move apart from one another more so. Eventually they'll reach the liquid phase, and then the gas phase. So let's take some notes on that. So in the solid phase, which is this one here, the material or the matter will hold its shape. Alright, so this might be an ice cube here, and it just holds that same shape with a fixed volume. And at this point, the heat energy or thermal energy, there's relatively little of it. Okay, now if we add some heat, we move to the liquid phase. This takes up the shape of the container in this state. So like a glass of water, you put water into a glass, depending on the shape of the glass, that's the shape that the water will take. It has a free surface, free to move about. Fixed volume still. And there is some more thermal energy than when it was solid. So finally, if we add even more heat, we move to the gas phase. This takes the shape and volume of the container, so it will fill any container that it's in. Even more thermal energy, more heat. Right. So what do we call these phase changes? Well, firstly, we're going to be going between solid, liquid, and gas, right? So think about it like if you've got, say, some water, liquid water, you've put out of the tap into, say, an ice tray and you want to freeze it, you're going to put it into the freezer, and the liquid becomes solid ice. This is called freezing. What about going back the other way? When you take the ice out of the fridge, if you left it sitting on the kitchen bench, it would melt. So we call that melting. You might want to pause the video now and try and fill in the rest of these. There's a couple of tricky ones, but see how you go. Okay, so liquid to gas is, well, I suppose you could say boiling. That would be okay, but I'm going to put evaporation. Gas back to liquid, condensation. This is a physical phenomenon you might see frequently on a window, like in a car, the car windshield. When you hop in the car, it's cold outside, so the window will be cold from the outside air. And when you hop in the car, you create water vapors. So they're in a gas form, but once they touch the cold window, they'll cool down and they'll condense and become liquid on the inside of the windscreen. They're just some water molecules that are losing thermal energy. Okay, if something goes from solid directly to gas, that's called sublimation. So there are a few materials that do that. So they don't go solid liquid gas, they go straight from solid to gas, no liquid phase in between. Now gas can deposit as a solid, so this is called a deposition, going that way. Okay, so that is how we name the different physical states and the transitions between them. We need to understand that matter is composed of a large number of small particles, and that if we add thermal energy to this matter, those particles will gain energy. They'll move more rapidly as we add thermal energy, heat them up. They'll move more rapidly and move further apart from one another, eventually moving from the solid phase to the liquid phase and then eventually the gas phase.